I often think about the idea if someone said to me, "Why do you play video games?" What video games would I use to showcase this media? What would make them understand why I love them so much? Sure, a Last of Us, a God of War, something so narrative heavy, so cinematic. But there's more to video games than a strong cinematic story. And that's not to say I don't love them games. God of War Ragnarok is defo in the upper echelon of my favourite games ever. Point is, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is now one of those games I would take, put in their hands, and say, this. Yes, it has that immersive cinematic story like those games I just mentioned, but it has terrific moment to moment gameplay, a score that I'll never tire of listening to, alongside a cast of characters that I deeply connect with. The one thing, though, is that it never forgets its roots as a video game. For every moment of serious tension and stakes, there's a moment you'll think, what the actual fuck am I doing here? For every bombastic boss fight, there's a small moment of helping some kids find a bird that flew away. For all the tears, there's joy. For all the time spent in the world, there's reward. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is an all-timer for me, an experience that I'll never forget. It's the moment that made me stand up and say, I get it now. Why this franchise means so much to so many, and why 7 in particular is so universally loved. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is the reason and reminder of why I play video games. So, before I go off singing its praises, voicing one or two gripes and delving into this experience, I need to put my history of Final Fantasy out there. 7 Remake was the first Final Fantasy I ever played. I really liked it at the time, but I just never quite connected. It could have been timing, interest, I don't know, it just didn't quite hit. I'm not sure if it's because it wasn't until the end of the game that I really understood the characters properly, but last year was when it started to click as a franchise. I played and finished Final Fantasy 16, which I loved a lot. I think it provided some of the highest highs I think I'll ever experience in games this decade. I loved Clive and I loved the crew in that game. I actually loved it so much that after finishing all the quests, I went and gave Final Fantasy 14 a proper chance. 90 hours later, I finished Heavensward and just haven't found the time to go back since. But I started to understand the music, the characters, the world. See, Final Fantasy on paper shouldn't really click with me because it's fucking bonkers. One moment you're battling a god, the next you're bringing back someone's chicken. So that takes us to Rebirth, right? Again, as someone who's never touched the original, I had no idea what to expect. I'd avoided the majority of trailers, not on purpose, just because 2023 was insane for games. 83 hours later though, it's now a video game experience that I will never ever forget. There's so much to talk about, but the first thing that really stood out to me was just the overall feel of the game. I don't think it's necessarily pushing the boundaries of next-gen consoles, but it does feel smoother. The combat is a lot more interesting to me, more thoughtful and engaging, all in the service of spectacle. I also think that it's really enhanced by the haptic feedback of the DualSense controller. On that note, however, the DualSense controller getting an update halfway through my playthrough, which I did not know about, tripled like the DualSense audio coming out of the speaker. So next time I did an open world like event for Chadley, I nearly shot myself, mate. It scared the life out of me. Anyway, one key aspect that delivered to me was synergy attacks. But me being the Muppet I am, guess who didn't know that you could do synergy attacks outside of ATB attacks until chapter 9? Oh my god. In Rebirth, you obviously get to play as characters outside of Remake with Red 13, Kate Sith, and Yuffie unless you played the intermission DLC. The combat just really clicked for me in this one. It's like the perfect combat framework that I would want if Knights of the Old Republic Remake ever sees the light of day. It just does such a great blend of balancing real-time combat and turn-based, and I think that's so cool. Plus, like, exploiting weaknesses, whether that be elemental or hitting an ATB attack after evading. The game just does such a great job of making you feel smart for staggering enemies, and then powerful once an enemy has been staggered. But every character kit feels so different. Like Cloud to me was always the all-rounder. Tifa was the staggerer and Barrett packed the punch. I love that the game as well isn't afraid to make you use characters you wouldn't otherwise use. Like Kate Sif defo took a backseat for me, but then the game forces you through a section with Kate, and then I really enjoyed that character's kit. Less box throwing though, I did not like that section. Boss fights too, again, no major spoilers here, but just incredible. Accompanied by fantastic music, they always felt an event, but also a puzzle. Fights against Shinra agents, taking down the summons in Chadley's combat arena, or the final showdown, which, I mean, wow. God, this game, it generally gets me excited just thinking about it again. I guess that brings us to the game's story. Again, me having no idea where it's going to go, confused by the ending of Remake, but I just rode with it, you know? It actually feels like an adventure. So many games try and make you feel like you're on this ride, this journey with these characters, but not many have done it for me like Rebirth did. From chapter 1 till the end, it really did feel like a globe-trotting adventure, traversing far and wide. But I don't think you can talk about this game's story without talking about its characters. See, when I talk about video games, the reason I think they can leave such an impact on you is because it's you. It's you playing. Sure, you might be Cloud, or you might be Kratos, or Arthur Morgan, or Clive Rosfield, but it has the advantage of you actually immersing yourself in this journey because it's you performing the actions. I think a big part of why this one works so well is that Cloud feels more alive, discovers more about himself. The party system also helps sell me on this notion. Genuinely, I'm not sure there's a stronger cast of characters in a game, at least with this many main players. Witcher 3 maybe, Baldur's Gate 3, sure, but I don't know man, by the time this game's credits rolled, I loved every one of these fuckers. But yeah, for every moment the world's fate is in the balance, there's a moment on top of a tower just talking about what's next. What if things had been different in life? They're not one-note characters. They ask the questions that you would ask if you were them. There's very few video games that have made me feel really emotional. This game is now on the list that has. There are moments in this game that just hit so hard, and I find it so hard to explain, but it's just humane moments. Whether it be knowing what your fate will be, but choosing to enjoy the moment with those around you, or feeling shamed at a place of sorrow from your past, but having a reason that is so deep that you just keep going. Just because the stakes of what's happening in this world is crazy, doesn't mean you lose the personal moments. And when those moments are accompanied by such an immaculate score, it's just perfect. That's why it works for me. Hearing Tifa's theme as you just have a private conversation about how Cloud was shy when he was a kid with her, it just adds to the personality of these characters. Or hearing Eris' theme as she gives a speech that lights up the entire room. These moments would always have been great, but now they're just elevated because of the score that accompanies it. In Remake, I thought, okay, there's a bit of a one-note aspect to some of these characters, particularly thinking about Barrett and Cloud, but in this one, I mean, they certainly ain't one note. Every cast member feels like they are important and integral to every single scene. The Loveless concert. I mean, it was a moment in this game where I was just swept into this world. In my save, I went on the date with Tifa, which, by the way, had I not got her, I was never rolling credits until I did, alright? But it was this moment where everything just clicked. And I don't just mean in terms of me liking this game. I mean it leaving an impact on me. The song No Promises to Keep, accompanied with Eris' theme, alongside everything that just happened in Loveless, was just like, wow, this is so special. It was this gameplay and cutscene sequence where I just felt engrossed on another level, where I felt so connected to these characters. I'm not a big musical guy either, but a good musical number in any video game, I just love the production of it. Like, I'm being purposefully light on talking specifics here because I want people to experience this just like I have. The game did a unique thing to me where once those credits started rolling, I just sat and just stared as a broken man, and that's when you know you've played something special. I just want to talk to people about this game. tell everyone how much I enjoyed it. And that to me marks a special video game and a special story. Maybe I'll do a separate video talking about story specifics, but this is not something I would intend to ever ruin for anyone else. Every character has their moment, there's no sidelining, and some of the cutscenes, oh my god, outstanding, there's no other way to put it. I understand that for fans of the original, there's a bit of a mixed reception to the game's big moments, which I understand. Say that a Knights of the Old Republic remake happened, which is a game that is very dear to me, and they change big plot elements too, I would be a little bit more mixed. But as a newcomer, I really enjoyed it, and the direction that I think it's heading in. Naturally, making changes to such a precious entry won't please everyone, but I feel confident in saying that even if it did, the rest of the package makes up for it. As for other things that I really enjoyed, like I say, I loved the grand events, the boss fights and the big story beats, but the game had its hooks in me because it's such a compelling world to be in. Whether you're driving, riding, gliding or running, it's just such a charming world to explore. It needs to be studied how they managed to crank a game of this size out in 4 years, by the way. The game feels almost impossible in terms of sheer content and size. Look, not all of it works, but most of it does, and that's important. I did every proto relic outside of the final challenges, and I missed one side quest at the Golden Saucer. More because I made a decision like, okay, this stuff is going to be really challenging. I don't want anything that's going to taint my first playthrough. Though I have every intention of going back and seeing those last few quests through. I'm actually someone who's grown quite tired of open worlds because it feels like padding a lot of the time, or something that just draws the game out. This is very much that kind of Ubisoft checklisty open world. Towers, combat trials, scan the thing. I get a lot of people may have a problem with this open world, but somehow I always loved exploring it. Whether it be the soundtrack of an open area, Gongaga in particular, the scenery of an area, or always feeling suitably rewarded for doing a specific task. The proto relics were of course the standout. I mean, look, this game is big enough, but then you've got mini games almost inside mini games. Ford Condor was one that got me off guard because, like I say, I missed a lot of marketing, so I never saw this. I was like, what? I had so much fun with this. The gameplay and puzzle variety of every mini game is just, in my head, I cannot fathom this development. The cactus trials though, they can get stuffed, mate, honestly. But a 1v1 fighter, a bloody space shooter arcade, it is nuts. Of course, if you played the game, you're probably screaming about one side activity that I haven't mentioned this deep into the video yet. Queen's Blood. Mate, like, how? I finished this chain and man did I have so much fun doing it. Like, how are you giving me such sensational combat with deep mechanics and then you're also like, here's a card minigame that's going to rival Gwent as one of the best card games in video games. Period. Nuts, man. It is nuts. Do I want it to be a standalone release? I don't know. I feel like it's so special because it's a part of this game. The intricacies and the thoughts behind every single card is crazy. The tournament aboard the cruise ship was a highlight of the game to me. Not to mention that, of course you have your matches, but then there's also challenges where like you're given select cards and you have to figure out how to win that particular match with those set cards. Some of my most satisfying moments in this game were finally working out how to counter a particular foe in Queen's Blood. It really is as good as everybody says it is. Just like how the combat does an excellent job of making you feel clever by exploiting weaknesses, so too does Queen's Blood for outwitting an opponent. But again, in terms of scope, I can't believe how much there is here. A distinct minigame for each proto relic, which takes that quest to a very interesting place. Queen's Blood, and then all the shenanigans of the Golden Saucer. I mean, I've not even mentioned the Moogles and that minigame. This is why it's so bloody good. Because one moment Sephiroth is threatening everyone's existence, the next minute I'm chasing Moogles around a garden while they throw a banana skin at me. It shouldn't work, but it does, and it's magical. The scope of this game is just off the charts. You can be like me and do everything in terms of questing. But then there's hard mode to the mini games as well. There's more combat trials. And of course, once you beat the game opens up the ability to play it on hard, which means you can't use items, and well, if you're into pain, go ahead. I haven't even mentioned like the actual side quests, which just further deepens relationships with these characters. You always have a side companion with you for one of these quests. Whether that be meeting Bill at the Chocobo Ranch and then having this quest chain that goes all the way up to competing in the Gold Cup, to getting this really touching story about him and his family. Whether it's checking out a mansion for reported ghosts, dreaming of blue skies, helping someone relive an unforgettable moment, Johnny's seaside shenanigans, which, shout out to Yuri Lowenthal, he really is the best, all the way to stargazing or capturing images to reignite a storyteller. And if all that sounds crazy, that's because it is, but it works because it's always grounded by emotion and personality. There's always a humane feeling to it. It's always an environment that you love being a part of, and always with a cast of characters that you just love spending time with. There's of course frustrations, for sure. Like, oh my god. As every Final Fantasy does, the final boss obviously has phases, right? But why on earth is the bloody retry screen so confusing? It's like 3 options, like try from before last battle, retry from this battle, or retry from before battle. Like, what? I died on the final phase of the last boss, and then I clicked the wrong option, and I had to do it all over again, man. No chance to roll back. I felt so much pain. Also, this is more like a me thing, but when developing a game for console, I really do wish developers would just pick a graphics option and commit. If you want to have the game at 60 frames, go all in. I feel like otherwise, we just get 2 half-baked graphics modes rather than a specific vision. Again, not every side quest was perfect. I could have done with 1 or 2 less combat trials or towers, but it's so minor. There were, of course, unnecessary padded out sections in the main story that they just weren't required, and the payoff was never there for them. It did have a weird impact on the pacing at times, but I do think the overall package was strong enough that it almost made me forget about them. But yeah, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, if I haven't made it clear enough, this is an all-timer. A game you just can't help but want to talk about. Combat that delights, environments that are just diverse and full of personality, a cast of characters that are just so complex yet relatable that by the end you really do feel a part of the crew. A story that goes to insane places and yet never loses grasp of telling a story that I loved every minute of. Sometimes a game just hits at the exact moment you need it to. I've always heard about people gush about Final Fantasy, whether it be friends tell me about Final Fantasy XIV's adventure and journey, or creators that I followed for years like Imran Khan, Tim Geddes, Michael Hyam, just express why Final Fantasy is so special. And I've always thought, I guess I can see why. But then Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came along, and I get it now. This franchise is special, it's charming, it's off its head, but it's extraordinary. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a reminder of why I play video games. So there's my thoughts on Rebirth, just trying to delve into why I love it so much. Really, it's games like this that made me want to start creating content, a place to air my thoughts on stuff that I just really love. So if you enjoy me rambling about this game, it's my goal here to just talk about the stuff I really do like in video games. So if you did enjoy that, consider subscribing because I would really appreciate it. Now I want to know, have you played Rebirth? If so, what are your thoughts on it? Are you a newcomer? Have you played the originals? And if so, how did that impact you with the story? I also definitely want to know, what was your favourite minigame? And 100%, who did you go with on the Sky Wheel? I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. If you enjoyed hearing my thoughts, leaving a like helps me out immensely. I would really appreciate it in the most unpredictable YouTube algorithm. I hope you have a terrific day, and I'll catch you in the next one.